तो परस्यूट ऑफ प्रूफ के बारे में जब मैं सोचता हूँ तो आई एम रिमाइंडेड ऑफ अ मूवी। तो उसके अंदर एक बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग सीन है। राजेश खन्ना, हु इज़ एन आर्टिस्ट, he wants to marry this lady, Sharmila Tagore, her name is Mansi. So he goes to her father to ask for his permission. Obviously the father is very upset and he says, तुम क्यों मानसी से शादी करना चाहते हो? क्योंकि मैं मानसी से प्यार करता हूँ। तुम्हारे पास क्या सबूत है कि तुम मुझसे प्यार करते हो? तो राजेश खन्ना says, वैसे by the way, हम दोनों प्यार करते हैं, बीच में रोकने वाले आप कौन होते हैं? He says, मैं मानसी का पिता होता हूँ नहीं हूँ। तो राजेश खन्ना उनको कहता है, आपके पास क्या सबूत है कि आप उनके पिता हैं? I don't know whether when the constitution was adopted and implemented and when it was framed, whether the constitution makers thought of a day when so casually the issue of citizenship would be reopened, and it will become a source of immense anxiety to the citizens. But a person who can participate in the affairs of the state by electing his or her representative. तो उसके लिए, I'm sure this is elementary, that the Constitution said, Article 5 to Article 11, this is what citizenship would be. And mind you, those are very complicated times. People were moving from one place to another, and I don't think anybody has had any document as such. The Supreme Court in its judgment said that this is a rebuttable presumption. If your name is included in the electoral roll because you are a citizen of India, that presumption that you are eligible, that can be rebutted. The Election Commission is a very unique institution. It is different from all other institutions created by the Constitution. And why do I say that? Because if you look at the courts, or you look at the tribunals, or the Comptroller and Auditor General and the Finance Commission, all these bodies that have been created in the Constitution, their working is intimately connected with the working of the government. Even the courts, half the time they are taking decisions where the decisions of the government are challenged. But the Election Commission of India, its working has a direct compact with the citizens.
दोस्तों, पहले यही माना जाता था कि जिसका जन्म जिस देश में हो गया वो उस देश का नागरिक है, पर आज क्या जन्म होने के बाद भी आप इस देश के नागरिक हैं, ये एक बहुत बड़ा सवाल खड़ा हो गया है। ऐसे में नागरिक का जो सबसे बड़ा अधिकार होता था वो अधिकार होता था वोट डालने का, यानी कि हर भारतीय नागरिक का अधिकार है कि वो वोट डाले और अपने उम्मीदवार, अपने कैंडिडेट, अपनी पार्टी को चुने। लेकिन हमने देखा है कि अब ये अधिकार भी धीरे धीरे छीना जा रहा है और उसमें कोर्ट क्या कहता है? कोर्ट कहता है कि अगर चलो इस बार तुमने वोट नहीं डाला, अगली बार डाल देना। इन सबको समझिए, सिटीज़नशिप क्या चीज़ है और इलेक्शन कमीशन किस तरह से सिटीज़नशिप यानी कि नागरिकता तय करने लगा है, इसको समझाने के लिए हम अशोक लवासा साहब के साथ पास आपको लिए चलते हैं। पूर्व इलेक्शन कमिश्नर रहे हैं भारत के। ये बात पूरी अंग्रेज़ी में है, इसमें आप अपने कैप्शंस ऑन कर सकते हैं, जिस भाषा में आप पढ़ना चाहें पढ़ सकते हैं और सुनना चाहें सुनिएगा। बात बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है, पूरा वीडियो अंत तक ज़रूर देखें।
Now we are discussing elections, and the main factor in elections is the Election Commission, and we have a former election commissioner in this panel, Mr. Ashok Lavasa, who will speak on citizenship and elections. So Mr. Lavasa, please.
Thank you very much. I don't know if it is by design or a happy coincidence that today is 4th July and 1776 Declaration of Independence. And as Pratap Bhanu Mehta wrote this morning, that whether America survives or not, but the spirit of the declaration will survive. And what is the spirit of the declaration? The spirit is, it basically recognizes the life, the right to life, the right to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So these were considered to be unalienable rights. But I think in the present times, most of us in India are busy in the pursuit of evidence, proof. और यहाँ पर इतने सारे यंगस्टर्स बैठे हैं, तो परस्यूट ऑफ प्रूफ के बारे में जब मैं सोचता हूँ, तो आई एम रिमाइंडेड ऑफ अ मूवी which was released in 1974 probably. The name of the movie was Avishkar, बासु भट्टाचार्य. तो उसके अंदर एक बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग सीन है. Rajesh Khanna, who is an artist, he wants to marry this lady, Sharmila Tagore. Her name is Mansi. She belongs to a very wealthy family. So he goes to her father to ask for his permission. Obviously, the father is very upset. And he says, "Tum kyon Mansi se shaadi karna chahte ho?" मैं मानसी से प्यार करता हूँ. तुम्हारे पास क्या सबूत है कि तुम मुझसे प्यार करते हो? तो राजेश खन्ना सेज, वैसे बाय द वे हम दोनों प्यार करते हैं, बीच में रोकने वाले आप कौन होते हैं? ही सेज, मैं मानसी का पिता होता हूँ नहीं, हूँ. तो राजेश खन्ना उनको कहता है, आपके पास क्या सबूत है कि आप उनके पिता हैं? तो I don't know whether when the constitution was adopted and implemented and when it was framed, whether the constitution makers thought of a day when so casually the issue of citizenship would be reopened. And it will become a source of immense anxiety to the citizens. Essentially, I think what happened in 1947 and thereafter in 1950 was that so many states, 562 or whatever that number, became a union of India. And the subjects became citizens. What is a citizen? Not a person who lives in a city, but a person who can participate in the affairs of the state by electing his or her representative. तो उसके लिए, I'm sure this is elementary, that the Constitution said, Article 5 to Article 11, this is what citizenship would be. And mind you, those are very complicated times. People were moving from one place to another, and I don't think anybody has had any document as such. But the broad principles were defined, and I think those broad principles were very simple. One was the presumption of citizenship, and the other was a continuation of that presumption. Now, of course, in the latest judgment, which was delivered on 27th of May by the Supreme Court, again, irony, that's the death anniversary of Jawaharlal Nehru. It says this is a rebuttable presumption. The Supreme Court in its judgment said that this is a rebuttable presumption. If your name is included in the electoral roll because you are a citizen of India, that presumption that you are eligible, that can be rebutted. Anyway, we'll come to that later. So these were two very elementary principles which were enshrined in the Constitution. But I think they did one more very remarkable thing, and that is they created this institution of the Election Commission of India. Because I think it was very well understood that there has to be an institution which will carry forward this process of strengthening the whole business of electoral democracy. And I think that whoever knows the Constitution will also know that the Election Commission is a very unique institution. It is different from all other institutions created by the Constitution. And why do I say that? Because if you look at the courts, or you look at the tribunals, or the Comptroller and Auditor General and the Finance Commission, all these bodies that have been created in the Constitution, their working is intimately connected with the working of the government. Even the courts, half the time they are taking decisions where the decisions of the government are challenged. But the Election Commission of India, its working has a direct compact with the citizens. It is supposed to perform only two simple tasks. One is enroll you as a elector, and the other is to make sure that elections are conducted in a free and fair manner. These are the two simple things. But the complication arises because you can be enrolled as an elector only if you are a citizen of India. So the Election Commission was given the responsibility of creating an electoral roll of people who qualified as per Article 326. That is the only article which says who is eligible to be an elector. Now, does it mean that in the last 75 years, Election Commission has been enrolling people without ascertaining that they are citizens of India? Clearly not. In fact, if you look at the first electoral roll, which was created in 1950, the interesting thing about that electoral roll is that it was created even when the census figures of 1951 were not available. 1941 census figures were available. But then 41 was a different context. And 1951 elections were to be conducted, 1951 eventually they got conducted. In that environment, the Election Commission went about creating an electoral roll. And the interesting part, which is captured in the report prepared by the Election Commission of India on the first elections, is that the first electoral roll had something like 17.30 crore voters, electors, who were enrolled. Now, when it was compared with the census data, which was subsequently released, the difference between the cohort 21 and above, as per census data, I think the number was 18.02 crore. And here this machinery had successfully enrolled 17.30 crore people. So the gap was only 72 lakh. What I am saying is that in the absence of documents, the Election Commission, through its machinery, was able to enroll maximum number of people if you go by the EP ratio. And there is an Israeli author, Onit Shani, I think is the name. She has written a book on this first elections of India. And she has used a very interesting expression that how the election machinery was able to be so inclusive was because of democratic imagination. Now, what that meant was, and she's given an example of people living, so-called encroachers in Bombay, who were encroaching on common municipal land. They had no proof of anything, and yet they were enrolled as electors. So, the point I'm trying to drive home is that there was always a presumption of citizenship attached to whoever is around. And the identification of non-citizen was an exception. Even if you look at the form, even today if you look at the Form 6, for a first-time voter, he only makes a declaration that I am a citizen of India. The evidence that he gives is of his date of birth, of his identity, and his proof of residence. Because unless the proof of residence is determined, you cannot figure in the electoral roll of that particular constituency. So that is the architecture which has been followed successfully, and as it has been often said, that we have been able to achieve an EP ratio of 98-99% because of this inclusive approach. Now, what has happened in the SIR? So suddenly, it is decided on 24th of June 2025, notification is issued, and to my mind, what has happened in that notification is something which defies logical explanation. One is that the Election Commission says, and this was in the context of Bihar, where an electoral roll through the normal legal process was conducted and published in January 2025. So suddenly, less than 6 months down the line, there is a realization that something is horribly wrong with the electoral roll. And we must conduct this so-called special intensive revision. And what do they do? You divide the already enrolled electors into two groups. Those who were enrolled before 2003 and those who were enrolled after 2003. All of them have been enrolled by following the same process as prescribed by the Election Commission. So why do you divide them into two categories? But further, to compound this problem, you say that those who were enrolled before 2003, they have a probative evidence of eligibility if they existed in that role. This is okay. I mean, to have a probative evidence of eligibility is all right. But then there is a presumption of citizenship. This is an expression used in the notification. So to my mind, and to the best of my limited knowledge and understanding, while conducting any kind of revision as provided in the Representation of People Act or in the registration rules, Election Commission has never used the expression of citizenship while conducting revision. Although there is a provision in law that non-citizens can be excluded. But for that, somebody has to say that so-and-so is a non-citizen, and not only create suspicion, but has to produce evidence that I suspect that this person is not a citizen of India, and here is the evidence to create that doubt. So that provision does exist, but as I said, that is an exception, not the rule. Now, restricting myself only to the citizenship and elections, the judgment delivered by the Supreme Court has also raised several questions. And while raising these questions, I think it has given the opportunity to the people of India to ask some questions and to the Election Commission to answer these questions. So the first thing that comes to my mind is that Supreme Court said that there is material on record to show that a piecemeal exercise of the routine revision prescribed in law would not have served the purpose. And that material on record shows that probably the electoral rolls needed a wholesale revision. What is that material on record? We don't know. Nobody knows. At least it is not in the public domain. I don't even think that it is part of the court records. So what is the basis of that conclusion? That is question number one. The other is that even if we accept that the purpose behind the SIR were the purpose which were declared by the Election Commission in that notification of 24th June. And what are those purposes? A, they said we will ensure that no ineligible person is retained in the electoral roll. It's a fair purpose. Nobody can quarrel with that. And they also said that we want to purify the rolls. So let us now subject the outcome of the SIR to these two purposes and ask for evidence to show that the outcome of this exercise indeed fulfills the purpose. जिस मकसद से आपने किया था, जो बताया था कि ये हमारा मकसद है, क्या ये मकसद पूरा हुआ या नहीं हुआ? तो पहला मकसद तो इनएलिजिबल लोगों को निकालना है। और जैसा मैंने बताया, इनएलिजिबिलिटी की परिभाषा केवल आर्टिकल 326 में दी गई है। और आर्टिकल 326 में ये कहा है कि आपकी उम्र, आप भारत के नागरिक होने चाहिए। फिर कहा है कि आपकी उम्र 18 साल होनी चाहिए। फिर ये कहा है कि आपकी दिमागी हालत दुरुस्त होनी चाहिए, हालांकि इसका कोई प्रमाण नहीं होता कभी। और चौथा ये कहा है कि you should not have been disqualified under any law. So now, इस पैमाने पर कितने लोगों को हटाया गया इलेक्टोरल रूल्स? बिकॉज इनएलिजिबिलिटी तो यही है और तो है नहीं। देयर इज नो डेटा available in the public domain to show how many people have been deleted because they were ineligible. Yes, there is data to show that people were deleted because they had shifted from one place to another. That doesn't make you ineligible. It only means that you should be registered somewhere else. And if you are dead, you are dead. You should be out. And if there is duplication, obviously you should exist only in one place. So the question is that will this data be made public? That under Article 326, so many ineligible people have been discovered and deleted. Because, mind you, in the order, Supreme Court said that within 4 weeks of such deletion, you should refer these cases to the Foreigners Tribunal. I think 4 weeks are already over after that order. So let us know how many people have been referred to the Foreigners Tribunal because they were ineligible. And the second thing, of course, is that if you say we wanted to purify the electoral roll, then please tell the people that this is the way the rolls were contaminated earlier, And because of this effort that we have made, 50 crore electors have already been covered in the 13 states and union territories. So what is the degree of purity? How do you assess the health of the electoral roll in comparison to what it was earlier? So I think this must be disclosed to the people. And further, although there are questions about the SIR itself, the exercise, the manner in which it is being conducted, but since the Supreme Court has upheld the might of the Election Commission and the right of the Election Commission to conduct the SIR, so probably it will go on. So let us at least understand if any lessons have been learned from the previous exercise and whether there are any improvements which Election Commission proposes to bring. Incidentally, now that Delhi and Haryana, where I live, are being subject to SIR, there is any number of people who are making calls. I had given the example in one of the interviews of a colonel of the Indian Army. He rang up and he said, my wife's name is missing. We've been married 50 years. And it's missing because they cannot compare, tally the name of her father, whose name exists in Bhiwani, and the name that she spells of her father. They can't compare. There are so many people who are anxious whether they will continue to vote or not. So let me end by saying that all these 13 documents, and you have so many documents of proving that you are a taxpayer or you have an identity through Aadhaar or you have a school living certificate. तो उससे फिर मुझे एक बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग कृष्ण बिहारी नूर की एक नज़्म है, तो उसके अंदर एक बड़ा अच्छा शेर है। तो नज़्म ये है कि ज़िंदगी से बड़ी सज़ा ही नहीं और क्या जुर्म है पता ही नहीं, इतने हिस्सों में बट गया हूँ मैं, मेरे हिस्से में कुछ बचा ही नहीं।
तो देखिए बड़ी खूबसूरती के साथ उन्होंने बताया कि वो राजेश खन्ना से उसके बाप के तुम कौन हो, मैं मोहब्बत करता है कि तू कौन है, बाप है। अब जो तय करेगा जो देश का नागरिक है उसको वोट डालना है या नहीं है, वो देश का नागरिक कह रहा है कि मैं इस देश का नागरिक है, तो दूसरा पूछ रहा है कि तू कैसे इस देश का नागरिक है, तेरे पास क्या कागज़ है। अब कागज़ कौन से होंगे जो देश का नागरिक जिसे बनाया जा सकता है, इस पर एक चर्चा होने लगी है और ये मुद्दा सरकार ने क्यों बनाया है इसको भी लोग सोच समझ रहे हैं। उम्मीद है कि ये वीडियो आपको पसंद आया होगा। अपना वोट जो हमारा अधिकार है वो अधिकार आपके पास रहे, इसके लिए आपको क्या करना होगा तो ये आपने समझा होगा, सुना होगा। अगर वीडियो पसंद आया है लाइक करें, शेयर करें और ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लोगों तक इस बात को पहुंचाएं और अपने दोस्त हैदराबाद नकवी को इजाज़त दें। फिर होगी मुलाकात एक नई चर्चा के साथ, तब तक के लिए नमस्कार।